Chapter 10. Through the Wire. The Accident. I must got an angel, 'cause look how death missed his ass. Unbreakable. What you thought they call me, Mr. Glass? Kanye West. Through the Wire. College dropout. It was 5 in the morning when the phone rang. October 23rd, 2002. I picked it up and immediately recognized the voice. It was Sumiki, Kanye's girlfriend at the time. She was talking through tears, saying she hated to wake me so early in the morning, but Kanye had been in an accident. I sat straight up in the bed, fully awake at that moment. Before she could continue, I began firing questions. Where was the accident? Who was driving? Was he hurt? I asked her all in one sentence and in one breath. He's in Los Angeles still, she said, no calmer than when she started. I think he was driving. He's, he says he's all right, but the car is totaled and they can't get him out of it. I was stunned. Still, I managed to remain composed. Okay, I said. Calm down. It's going to be all right. I asked her who had notified her, and when she told me Kanye had dialed her from his cell phone and told her to call me, I was relieved. I knew that he would be all right, partly because I couldn't stand the thought of it being any other way, and partly because he'd at least made the call himself. Sumiki, stay right by the phone, I said. I'm going to try to reach him, and I'll call you right back. She agreed and seemed just a little calmer. I hung up the phone as fast as I could. I dialed his cell number. Hello? He answered on the first ring in a low, muffled voice. I could hardly understand. Kanye, is that you, baby? Uh-huh, he mumbled. I was in an accident, Mom. I'm hurt. My heart sank at the sound of his weakened, helpless voice. Kanye, where exactly are you? Do you know? I'm not sure, he said. Ma, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt myself. Sorry? Hurt himself? I had no idea what he was talking about. And all I wanted to do was tell him that it would be all right. Before I got the chance, however, another voice came on the phone. It must have been a police or the paramedics. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we'll call you when we get more information, the man said abruptly. I'm trying to cut your son out of this car. But where is he? I asked. Where's my son? Where exactly is he right now? Hurriedly, he told me where they were and that they didn't know yet what hospital they'd be taking Kanye to. He said he had to hang up. Kanye was still pinned in the car. What? It was crazy. I was crazy inside. I had to get to my child immediately. He'd been in an accident and it was horrible, and they were cutting him out of a car. I was also very calm. I have always been steady during a crisis. I somehow find strength and am able to gather my wits about me and handle the situation, no matter what it is. I called Samiki back and let her know I'd just spoken with Kanye, and she'd better get packed immediately so we could get to him. I made reservations for the two of us to leave on the next flight out of Chicago to Los Angeles. My then 87-year-old parents were visiting me from Oklahoma City and were asleep in the next room. Mother had become very ill and had just come home from the hospital the day before. She, too, was very weak. What would I do about her? Without even thinking about it, I called Helen, a very dear friend. I told her what had happened, and she was at my house in what seemed like minutes. She told me not to worry about my mother and daddy. She would be sure they were okay. I called Glenda, who lived in Los Angeles. I told her that Kanye had been in a serious accident on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica. Immediately, she knew which hospital they'd probably take him to. She said she'd find out as much as she could and keep me posted. I finished throwing a few things in my suitcase, woke up Mother and Daddy and explained the situation to them, and headed out with Helen to pick up Sumiki and get to the airport. By the time I got to the airport in Chicago, Glenda called with the news of what hospital Kanye had been taken to. She was on her way there. I arrived in Los Angeles and for some crazy reason rented a car rather than taking a cab straight to the hospital. I guess I was just used to doing that and had not thought about the delay there might be in getting a car. It didn't take very long though. I cut in front of the second person in line, explaining that my son had been injured and I needed to get to the hospital quickly. No one objected. I guess they could see in my face how serious I was. Once I got the car, Sumiki and I jumped in and were on our way. I called Glenda and she guided me straight to Cedars Sinai. I was on automatic. I had to get there and find out if Kanye was okay. In my spirit, I knew he would be fine. After all, he had called right after the accident. If he had that much strength right after it happened, he had enough to pull through. Now, now was not the time for me to let go of my unshakable faith in God. I just kept praying. I'd been praying constantly since I got the call. Oh God, let my baby be all right. I probably made a string of promises too about what I would or would not do if he just let Kanye be all right. I got to the hospital and Glenda was there to greet me. She gave me a big hug but didn't say much. She just told me where Kanye was and pointed the way. She seemed upset, but I was so focused on seeing Kanye that I didn't process it. He was still in the emergency room. It had been more than 8 hours since the accident, and he had just gotten a treatment room minutes before I arrived. I guess he was just a regular black guy. He wasn't Kanye West at this point. He had just signed his deal with Rockefeller. He had done H to the Izzo with Jay-Z, which was his first hit single, but his was not a household name. Not that it should have mattered, because everyone would receive a star treatment in the hospital. I pulled back the curtain and there he was. Glenda had not prepared me for what I was seeing. I don't think anyone could have prepared me. Kanye was unrecognizable. Glenda had tried to wipe off most of the blood from his face and chest before I got there, but his head was 3 times its normal size. It was as big as the pillow they had it on. If I had not known I was looking at my own child, I would not have recognized him. His face was so swollen, so deformed. In fact, I thought perhaps it wasn't really Kanye I was looking at. Hi, Mom, he managed to say when he saw me come in. That was the only thing that confirmed for me that he was indeed my Kanye. I couldn't believe he could even speak, but I refused to react. I knew he hadn't seen himself, and I didn't want to alarm him, so I kept a poker face. Hey, baby, I said. Oh, you're going to be just fine. Right then, Glenda went out to the waiting room to get Sumiki. Only 2 visitors at a time could be in the little emergency room cubicle. I eased out for a minute with Glenda and told her to warn Sumiki that Kanye hardly looked like himself, so that she would not react. Then I came back in to see if I could do anything for my child other than just be there and try to share his pain somehow. I wish that I could have taken it for him. I thought about his career and about all of his plans, and I wished it had been me in the accident instead. We'd not yet seen the doctor, and I had no idea whether Kanye's face would ever be the same as it had been. I guess Glenda did a good job preparing Sumiki because when she walked in, she was pretty calm and collected. Hi, baby, she said, and then she hugged him. When she looked at his face and his swollen body, she told him, it's not so bad. It was horrible, but like me, she did not want to worry or upset him. Both of us could have gotten an Academy Award for our performance that day. In fact, we deserved a star on the sidewalk of Hollywood Boulevard. We knew, like everyone who knows Kanye, that he was very conscientious about his looks. He has always been that way. When he got braces, I remember his cousin Stephen asking him why. Because I'm going to be on TV, Kanye said. None of us thought he really needed braces, but Kanye wanted his teeth to be perfect. Knowing him as I did, I didn't want him worried about how he looked, so I was going to keep the front and keep the issue of his face out of the equation. Kanye would not be able to look in my eyes and see a hint of concern. That, I hoped, would be enough to comfort him. His face was broken in 3 places. He had on his safety belt, thank God, but the airbag didn't deploy and his face hit the steering wheel with such force that it was crushed. Kanye, high off the excitement of his recording deal, had rented a Lexus, which is funny now that I think about it. His god sister's name is Alexis, and so is his fiance's, referring to neither of them, of course. In All Falls Down, he wrote, "She's so precious with the peer pressure, couldn't afford a car, so she named her daughter Alexis." Kanye was driving that Lexus at 4 in the morning and he fell asleep at the wheel. That's how it happened. When we were filling out the insurance claim, Kanye admitted to falling asleep. But one of the insurance brokers told him, "Don't say you fell asleep. Say you were cut off or a car was coming and you swerved to get out of the way. If you say you fell asleep, you will be taking the next 5 years of your career paying off a negligence claim." For several months, we were riding with this lie. But Kanye called me one day and said, "You know what, Ma? I'm not lying anymore. I don't care if I have to pay millions, and I'm down to my last dime. I'm telling the truth. I'll just make more money. Whatever it is, I'm just going to pay it." I thought about trying to talk him out of it, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. I told him that I would handle it, and he shouldn't worry about it. I told him to let me deal with the lawyers, but he was determined to make it right. Kanye didn't just hurt himself in the accident. When he fell asleep, he veered into another lane and hit another car. The man in the other car ended up with 2 broken legs and was off work, unable to take care of his family. That man was lying in the hospital because of me, he said. I have to tell the truth. Now, I consider myself honest, but I felt like a good lie could come in handy every now and then, especially against the system. Kanye was more highly evolved than I was in that way. He had been that way since he was little. He has always had a keen sense of right and righteousness. There was this little Mexican boy in the neighborhood whose name was Tony, and people used to call him Tony Taco. So I said something about Tony Taco one day, and Kanye got so mad at me. "Ma, how could you say that?" he said. "How would you like it if somebody called you Donda Chitlin?" He couldn't have been more than 11 or 12, but that's the way he was, and that's the way he is to this day. He didn't get that from me. If somebody broke into my house and stole a TV, I was the type of person who would say they stole too. I would justify it by saying to myself that they would depreciate that television and wouldn't pay me what it was worth. But it's still wrong. Kanye just was never that way. We had a flood one time and there was a receiver on the floor that got immersed in water. I told Kanye that we were putting that on the claim. "Oh no," he said. "We can't put that on there. It didn't even work." Now, I'm not saying he was an angel. It's just that as a rule, lying was not his thing. Most times, even if he knew he was unlikely to get in trouble, ultimately he would tell the truth. So I wasn't surprised when his conscience got the best of him. Just one honest friend saying, "Kanye, you should just tell the truth and be done with it," carried far more weight than any lawyer, insurance broker, or me justifying a lie that was weighing him down. There was much to get through before he'd speak on the actual cause of the accident again. The pain, the swelling, the exams, the surgery, and ultimately the recovery were all consuming. After the initial ordeal of being literally dropped on the ground when he first arrived at the hospital and was taken from the ambulance, he said that hurt worse than the accident. And waiting hours in emergency without treatment, there would be consultations and decisions that had to be made. What could be done about the face headed for Hollywood, or at least for a career in entertainment? Would the doctors be able to put him back together again? This was no fairy tale, and he was not Humpty Dumpty. When he whirled himself out of the bed all of a sudden and went to look in the mirror for the first time, he said, "I look like the clumps." I was relieved to hear him joke about it. By that time, we'd seen the doctor, a world-class plastic surgeon who assured us that through constructive plastic surgery, Kanye could be made to look almost exactly as he did before the accident. What a relief. I'll admit the doctor was also a pleasant distraction. He was very fine. My God, I thought, is he married? That was one good looking man. So much so that it was the first thing I noticed. Of course, my first concern was his credentials, his qualifications to not only do a good job, but the best job. But that did not stop me from thinking about how I could pull an Ivana Trump and go for someone who was much more than a decade my junior. Oh, if it had only been possible. Neither Billy D nor Denzel Washington had anything on this brother. Anyway, we were glad to hear the news and I came back to reality. The day of the surgery, the whole LA area family had gathered at the hospital. There must have been at least a dozen of us in the room. Sumiki and I were first joined by my sister Shirley. She was visiting from Detroit and immediately summoned my nephew Little John to bring her to the hospital. Big John, DeVette Jr., John or Jean, Yolanda, Lynn, Ricky, Corey, Sheila, Terrell, and Devetta all chipped in for the Thai food that would be somewhat of a comfort until the surgery was over. I didn't eat a bite. I couldn't. And after a while, several of us went to a waiting room closer to where the surgery was being performed and just waited. It's a wonder we weren't thrown out when we refused to leave the surgical area before we joined hands and prayed. My sister Shirley led us in asking for God's mercy. The doctor said the surgery would take only about 2.5 hours. Nearing that fourth hour, I began to get pretty anxious. My cousin Jean was my rock. She held my hand and kept saying, "It's going to be okay." I believed her, but still I was nervous. Finally, the doctor came down the hall, and we all jumped up when we saw him. Somehow, words would not come out of my mouth, and it was Jean who asked the doctor how it had gone. He told us everything had gone okay, but because of some x-rays they needed but didn't have, it had taken a little longer than expected and further surgery might be needed. Then he quickly assured us that Kanye would be fine. He'd just be in a lot of pain for a while and his face would still be really swollen. We thanked him and God. I wanted some of that Thai food, but it was all gone. The days went by fast, and in another week or so, Kanye was released from the hospital. We packed his things and headed straight for the W Hotel where he was staying. Since he had to have medicine around the clock, I called my job and told him I would not be back until later. When? I didn't know. The staff at the W was great. We moved into a two-bedroom suite and brought in everything we needed. A small refrigerator and a microwave. Kanye could eat almost nothing with his mouth wired shut. I spent a lot of time shopping in Ralph's trying to find just the right juice, soup, broth, straws, smoothies, anything I thought he might be able to get through those wires. And we had to make sure he took that medicine like clockwork, every 4 hours, night and day. I still have the medicine bottles and a little extra that he did not consume. It wasn't long before Kanye was back at work, right in the W Hotel. That's where Through the Wire was written. He'd started it even before he left the hospital, thinking of the lyrics and rapping them through his jaws wired shut. Kanye never writes his lyrics on paper. He just creates and remembers them, all of them, like a true genius. Sometimes I'd hear him on the phone talking as best he could about this dope song he was making and the beat he had in mind for it. Before I left, he convinced Rockefeller to let him go back to the studio, supposedly, I believe, to make more beats for their proven rappers. But in reality, he was making beats for himself. Since third grade, he'd written raps. By the time he got to seventh, he realized he'd need beats to rap over. That's how he became a producer. Now he was one. Painful as it must have been, he was determined to finish and record Through the Wire. The rest is history.